The history of Suriname during World War II was mainly focused on protecting the bauxite industry and guarding the borders with French Guiana, which was part of Vichy France, which is a fancy name for the French state. On 5 September 1939, Goslar, a German steamship with 16 Germans and 38 Chinese, it looked more Chinese than nothing else, reminds me of Suriname, asked for refugee in Suriname. On 10 May 1940, she was sunk on purpose by her crew to prevent it from falling into Allied hands, and her wreck is still visible in the Suriname River. When I was 6, me and my dad drove by the Paramaribo Bridge, and I asked, "What is that junk in the water?" He said, "A sign that we can make it through tough times. Also, just shit too expensive to clean up." Suriname was a colony of the Netherlands in 1940. At the start of the Battle of the Netherlands, it was defended by 200 soldiers of the Royal Netherlands East Indies Army, KNIL, and 180 local volunteers of the Schotterij. Yet troops from the Schotterij were banned to be used outside of Suriname. In 1941, Suriname had a government budget surplus for the first time in 75 years, of which would stay positive throughout the war. A budget surplus is when the government collects more in taxes than it spends. Boy, those were the good times. From November 1941 and onward, 2,000 American troops were stationed in Suriname, whom turned airstrip Sandaré into a major airport and built defensive works. No actual battles took place in Suriname though. On 1 September 1941, 3 months before the bombing at Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made an offer to Queen Wilhelmina to station 3,000 soldiers in Suriname. The number of troops was later revised to 2,000 soldiers, and they were placed under the command of the KNIL. The Netherlands would be responsible for the financial costs. Attempts were made to expand the Schotterij, and at its height, it comprised 5,000 volunteers. The American soldiers started to arrive from November 1941 onwards. In December 1941, the troops started to transform airstrip Sandaré into the largest airport of South America at the time. The airport was constructed to protect ships and factories against U-boat attacks, which are German naval submarine attacks. On 16 February 1942, U-156 destroyed 2 oil tankers near Aruba and then emerged to attack Alago Oil and Transport Company, the world's largest oil refinery. The crew forgot to remove the plug of the cannon, and the cannon exploded. In June 1942, about 22% of the bauxite fleet had been destroyed in the Caribbean. Another large airport near the border with Brazil was initially planned. However, in February 1942, a mutual defense treaty was signed between the United States, Brazil, and Suriname. Suriname was a major producer of bauxite, which is used to make aluminium, a vital resource for the aircraft industry. Between 1940 and 1943, Suriname supplied 65% of all American imports of bauxite. About 90% of all aluminium was used for military purposes. There was a political crisis in 1943 because Governor Johannes Kielstra used the state of emergency to imprison political opponents. The border with French Guiana, part of Vichy France, was a major concern and was defended by the Schotterij. On 16 March 1943, French Guiana sided with Free France, and the American troops were replaced by Puerto Ricans. Even though no actual battles took place in Suriname, it revitalized its economy. The international airport and roads further helped develop the economy. During World War II, 2 bauxite factories opened in Paranam and Unverdacht. By the end of the war, bauxite production played 1/3 of the country's gross domestic product, the total goods made by a country in a certain time period. The de facto independence during the war set in motion a movement for democratization and autonomy, the right to self-governization, which would at last lead to independence in 1975. But independence, my word, they still have only one cinema.